Hey team, in this video we're going to talk about why deals fall apart, okay? I'm Walker Dybel, best-selling author of Buy Then Build and creator of the Acquisition Lab. Deals fall apart for a number of reasons. Like there's so many that we couldn't possibly get into all the specific reasons just in one video. However, there is really four categories that causes deals to fall apart. And when I say deal, what I'm referring to is business acquisitions, right? So you're a buyer, you're out trying to acquire a business and it falls apart. I'll never forget the time that I was trying to acquire a business and I went to put in my letter of intent and the broker turned around and told me, well, Walker, you can't put that in because I'm actually gonna buy it. I had already gone and visited the business with the broker and he went ahead and put in an offer in front of me, and I have no idea what it looked like, but I thought it was very strange that he brought a number of buyers to the table and then ended up breaking a deal off even at that stage, right? I've had other deals where I was past letter of intent and it fell apart really because the financiers of the original company we were not able to reach terms. So even though I got terms with the actual operators and majority owners of the company, there were certain clauses that kept them from actually selling. And so I wanted to make a video about all of the things that goes on. In fact, there was two Acquisition Lab members just in the last month where their deals fell apart because of the seller. So here's the four categories, okay? It's actually rather simple. The seller, the buyer, the financier, or the broker, okay? And if we chop this up and look at why deals fall apart, let's go ahead and start with the seller. There's on-market and off-market deals. On-market means they're working with a broker or an advisor or an investment banker in order to sell their company, okay? And then off-market means that they're not, and maybe you just approach them on your own proprietary deal flow or efforts or whatever it is. And the thing is that like the number one reason deals fall apart in off-market deals is because of the seller, okay? The seller decides they don't want to sell. And the number one reason for a seller backing out, no matter which way they've gone to market, is that they're simply growing too fast. And what I mean by that is in the private capital markets, okay, there's high risk in acquiring a business, right? When the buyer comes in and is buying a business, it's basically a data point in time that they're running a valuation on and paying all that money to the buyer. Usually not all cash at close, but it depends on the deal size, okay? Sometimes it is. And so the thing is that when a business is growing too fast, let's just say that I'm gonna sell my company, I'm making $1 million a year, and I'm gonna be able to sell it for three times that. Bad example, say 3.5 times, so $3.5 million, okay? So I'm gonna get $3.5 million, but the thing is that all I told you was that I'm earning $1 million a year. Well, the year before I was earning $500,000, and the year before I was earning $250,000, and so in the next 12 months, I'm expecting to make $2 million. Why on earth would I wanna sell for $3.5 million? Right? Because if I just hold on to the business for another 18 months, I can make that $3.5 million and go out and sell it for more money on top of that, right? So there's a short period of time that I need to commit to as a seller in order to make a lot more money. In the same vein, I remember I was a seller once and we were under contract to sell, and pick a date, September 15th was our closing day, okay? All of a sudden, while we were under contract, we got a new potential order, and the potential order was significant in like it would probably increase the business's value by maybe even we were going to get 6 months of earnings in short order, like 1 month or whatever. During the negotiations, we found out that they were then deciding the day after closing, okay? And it was one of these things, and it was an ongoing contract. So the thing was, the value of our business was going to actually grow significantly like tomorrow, the day after closing, or maybe not, depending on if we got the order. So I did what every seller would have done in that instance. I actually threw the deal on the rocks. I bought some time, I had some documents, move around, I dragged my feet and I made it look natural. And truth be told, it actually kind of was. Like I didn't have to try that hard because things were always kind of slip, right? And so that was the reality here as well. And so there was a little thing where I maybe was gonna grow too fast, but it wasn't like a cumulative trajectory, but rather an event that was going to happen to change that. That's actually what just happened with one of our lab members. They got a new order, and they ended up pulling the business in like the week of closing. Why does a buyer throw a deal? Okay, and there's really two main reasons. And the first is new information. Okay, so after you put in an LOI, you go into due diligence. Okay, and during due diligence, that's your time to see is what was presented to me true. Okay, and when you get in there, usually some things come into focus. Okay, and maybe it wasn't what you assumed, and so all of your assumptions get corrected. But if you get in there and there's new information, then that might be reason to sort of back out. So I had one instance where there was a trademark issue on the brand of the business, okay? And it was enough of a, let's just say, legal challenge that the buyer ended up backing out because this was new information that came to light while they were under contract, okay? And the other reason a buyer backs out, other than new information, is cold feet, okay? Cold feet can mean a number of things, okay? I recently did a video on the leap of faith, okay? And I encourage you to go watch that video because it's all about the right mindset and understanding the business model and understanding what it is that you need to do to actually take that leap of faith, okay? Jason Yelowitz at Quiet Light Brokerage calls this, or something similar, the 11th hour freakout, which is the buyer understands at the last minute that they're about to take a big risk and all of a sudden there might be some kind of normal business operation change, okay? And if that happens, they might be sort of questioning like, hey, should I be buying this? And it's sort of the good broker's job to identify like, okay, is this a real material issue or is it something that the buyer's just sort of freaking out and overthinking this, okay? And the other reason there is that the cold feet thing is that there's something external, okay? Something like they're addicted to the paycheck, okay? And don't underestimate that frequent feel-good feeling of a nice fat paycheck. So a lot of times if you're out acquiring a business, you're gonna be like, say, a mid-career professional, or at least a young professional with dripping with potential, right? You've got things going on, like you have what it takes to do this. And so the thing is that like a lot of times those people end up in a situation where they're able to make a great living just like not taking any risk, not taking that leap of faith. And that can kind of play into this from time to time. Last is the financier. So, we talked about the investors of a startup that then 3 years later I was trying to acquire. I couldn't meet their terms because those startup entrepreneurs didn't grow the business to a level that supported a valuation that the investors originally bought into. So even though the market value was here, they were unwilling to sell because they bought in here, so they weren't gonna make whole. That was one part of it. More common, a financier is supporting the buyer, right? And you might have a sponsored searcher, let's say. This is someone who has raised money from a backer who's going to close on a business, a backer or backers, okay? If it's a search fund or something like that. Well, if the financing can't get pulled together, right? If you've got, say, an independent sponsor that can't actually raise all the money in order to close, there's no money there to actually close the deal, okay? So the financier can be a core reason for the deal falling apart, okay? The other is if the financier is the bank, okay? So the lender. There's a couple of reasons why a lender might pull out. It's infrequent, but it happens. The first is that it simply just doesn't pass committee. They sold the buyer on the fact that they were the right bank at the beginning, but by the time it makes its way to committee, you're already into the deal, and then they're saying, hey, we're not gonna do this. We don't like the global on you as a buyer. We don't like the lack of tangible assets on this deal. It's just not something that our bank actually does, right? Another option might be that the third-party valuation that the bank ran actually comes back under. I have seen that occur on one event. It didn't throw the deal, but it forced a reduction in purchase price, which then made the seller make a decision, do I want to go with this person and go back to market? But it was clear that the bank was really only going to finance a certain portion, okay? And really, the biggest reason a financier might pull out is also the same reason a buyer might pull out, would be material adverse change. So if there is a material event outside of normal business operations between, say, the LOI and closing, okay, if business were to drop, say, 15% in like a 90-day period, it's enough to scratch your head and say, okay, pause, what's going on here, right? And so it kind of points to risk. And so usually the financier will pull out if the buyer doesn't, okay? And the last is the broker. This came up in the acquisition lab once. The broker, not all brokers are created equal, okay? I talk a lot about how the private capital markets are unregulated. There's actually 0 licenses that you need. In certain states, you need a real estate license to be a broker, and that's it. And the thought there is, well, they're selling businesses. We should make them get something, right? And so they end up forcing a real estate license, which sometimes comes in useful, but more often than not has nothing to do with what we're doing. I was licensed by the Securities and Exchange Commission. That has since expired because I'm no longer working in the publicly traded markets. I work in the private markets, and so there's no application there. A lot of times brokers will get, say, they want to keep control as long as they can. And the reason why is because they are hired by the seller and more often than not represent the seller, okay? And as a result, they want to make sure that they get the best price for the seller, and they want to keep control as much as they can. And the reason why is because if you're the buyer, it's your money, which means you ultimately end up with all of the control in a deal. You're the one that decides if you actually close or not in the end. And so they're going to try to keep that control as much as they can very often, okay? A lot of times in different ways of keeping that control might be, hey, we don't do non-binding letters of intent. You've got to sign this binding agreement to get the business under letter of intent. And by the way, we won't give you enough information to make a good decision. It's an awkward position, but it happens all the time, okay? They might also have, preferred suppliers that they insist that, say you use their lender, okay? I will say that it could be the case that they've worked with that lender very often and that they know they can get a deal done. However, if they're that insistent on it, they're probably getting some sort of kickbacks from those lenders. I'm a broker. I work with many lenders. We don't take any kickbacks from any of our service providers because it skews what our decisions might be. Okay, and our suppliers appreciate that. Service providers appreciate that. Our buyers appreciate that. But it's not always the case, right? They're going to have certain incentives to use certain things, and they might force their agenda to a degree, sometimes to an extreme, and they can become somewhat accusatory in extreme situations. Okay, to the fact that they rather find a buyer, they'd rather shoot down a deal than in hopes of finding a buyer that's going to use their service provider rather than sell to that person who's not going to. Okay. Listen, if you are interested in learning more about how to acquisition entrepreneurship and how to acquire a business, check out my book, Buy Then Build. Check out buythenbuild.com. There's free resources there. Or if you are looking for more support in doing this, we created the Acquisition Lab, which is the first do-it-with-you buy-side advisory service. If that is of interest, please check out acquisitionlab.com and feel free to apply. We've got a pretty low acceptance rate. We only let in currently about 12% of applicants actually get in. Don't let that deter you. But we're very careful because we want to make sure that if you get into the Acquisition Lab, we can actually help you succeed. Okay, it's not built as sort of like an online course. However, there's plentiful online curriculum. There's plentiful tools. There's extremely great networking and service providers available to you, and group coaching to help you throughout your process, to help you out of your living room, so to speak, in order to make some of these financial decisions. How do I run a search? How do I think about this business? What should I offer? Hey, this came up, and you need assistance from people that have done it before. So we have about a half dozen M&A advisors, brokers, acquisition entrepreneurs effectively on call for those at the Acquisition Lab. So thank you so much, and see you soon.